Hey, I'm Hunter from Skill Thrive, and in this video, we're going to create an accordion using nothing but HTML and CSS. And we're going to be doing that using a tag called details and summary. Now, if you don't know what an accordion is, let's go ahead and look at what we're going to be building in this project. So you can see right here, we have an FAQ, so a frequently asked questions for a website, and we have some couple questions here. So if we click on here, does Acme Incorporated have a mobile app? It'll expand and show the content which would answer the question. Now this example down here is similar, but if we expand it, you'll see that we also have accordions nested within other accordions. So if we expand this, it gives our user the ability to find answers within the context of another question. So just so you have an idea now that what we're going to be building, let's head back to CodeSandbox.io, which is an online code editor. And this is where we're going to be writing our code. Now, I like to use CodeSandbox because it's easy to share and update code, and you don't have to worry about doing anything on your local machine. It's all right here in the browser. So once you sign up for CodeSandbox, come over and click on Create Sandbox. And over here under Official Templates, you should see a template called Static. Now, if you don't, you can always come up here and just search for it, then click here to create a new static project. All right, so by default, you'll have your code on the left and this preview on the right. So if we come over here and delete this H1 tag and save this, you'll see that our app gets updated. Now, I like to just get rid of this preview and open it in a new window. Then I like to come over to View, Appearance, and then Toggle Preview. And that just gives us some more space here to see the code. All right, so now that we have that, what we want to do is we want to do a couple things here in this head tag. One is to import the Google font we're going to be using in this project and also import the CSS file. So let's go ahead now and head to fonts.google.com. I'm going to click here on Roboto, but feel free to choose whatever font you want. Then I'm going to come down to this regular 400, click on Select This Style, come over to Embed, and then copy this HTML for this link tag. Then we can come back to our project. Under this title, we can go ahead and just paste that here. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and change this so it's a little more descriptive. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. And the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and import our CSS file. Now, in this video, I'm going to be using Emmet, which comes pre-installed with CodeSandbox and VS Code. Now, if you don't know what Emmet is, essentially it's a way to write HTML, but using shorthand. So essentially it just speeds up your workflow. Now, if you're just learning HTML and you're not comfortable with using Emmet, feel free to just see the shorthand that I'm writing and feel free to just copy the HTML that it outputs. There's nothing wrong with that, but I do suggest you using Emmet because it'll just help speed up your workflow as you progress. So one thing we can do here in order to import CSS really quickly is we can write link. You can see that we already have these suggestions from Emmet. If we come down here and select this with our mouse, the :CSS, we now have the HTML code here written for us. Now this is pulling in a file called style.css, and that file doesn't exist yet. So we can come over here and click on this icon and type in style.css. And if we save that, we now have an HTML file that can use the Roboto font from Google, and it knows where our CSS file is located. Now, before we jump in and actually create the accordion, let's go ahead and create an H1 tag here. So with Emmet, you write the tag that you want first. So H1 is the tag. Then to add a class to that tag, you do period and then the class name. So in this case, we'll just call it title. Now in here, we want to write some things in between this H1 tag. And the way we do that is with curly brackets. So I'll just go ahead and write FAQ, do a closing curly bracket, and then hit return. You'll see here we have this H1 tag. All right, so now here's where the magic happens with the details and summary tags. So what we'll do is we'll first write details. And the way we want to do this is we want to have some things nested within this details tag. And the way we do that with Emmet is with an arrow like this. And we'll say summary. And here on this summary tag, we want the first question within here. So does Acme Incorporated have a mobile app? Okay. And again, we want to nest something within this details page. So you might be thinking, oh, we'll just do an arrow. Well, no, we don't want to do that because that would nest it within the summary tag. So instead, we'll do a plus sign, which will add it to the details as a child. What we want to do here is a div. So you might say, cool, let's do a div, but we can actually omit that because if we don't say what tag it is, emit is just going to assume that it's a div. So we can just go ahead and jump right into the class name by writing a period. And the name of this class is going to be details-content. Now in here, we do want some things nested within this. So we'll use an arrow tag, then a p tag for a paragraph. And another cool thing we can do is we can type in lorem and we'll generate some random text for us. So that's the entire emit code here. And if we hit return, you'll now see that we have this details tag. We have the summary with our question. We have this div called details content with some randomly generated text. So if we save that, come into our project and refresh this. Let's go ahead and zoom in so it's a little easier to see. And if we click on this, you'll see out of the box that it expands and shows you the content within this details tag. So out of the box with just a few lines of code, you get this accordion-like functionality with just HTML. Now let's actually come in, right click and click on inspect, just get an idea of what's actually happening here. So right now it's closed, and keep an eye here on this details HTML tag. So if I click on this, you'll see that this new attribute appears called open. And if I close that, it goes away. So this is a way that we can use later in our CSS to say, hey, does the details tag have the open attribute? And if it does, we can style it differently depending on if it's open or closed. So that's just something we're going to be doing here in just a few moments. Now, before we jump in and actually show you and do the CSS, let's show you the nested version, or the way you can actually nest details and summaries within other detail tags. All right, so the first thing I want to do, though, before we do that, is go ahead and do a horizontal line here. So if we save that, come back and refresh, you'll see now that we have this line break. And what I want to do is I want to do the exact same emit command that we did before. So details. In here, we're going to have a summary tag. The summary tag is going to have our next question, which is, does Acme Incorporated charge fees? So depending on this question, it's just, the answer to this depends on if you are a user or a seller. So that's why we're going to have nested levels within this. Now, before we do that, we're going to have a details here. So we'll do details-content. And again, here we're going to have a paragraph tag. And this paragraph tag is just going to have some lorem ipsum. So that's essentially the same thing we just did, but it looks like I made a mistake here. So let's actually go back and let's see what we did here. So details, summary. We forgot to do a plus, so let's do plus. And if we go back and do that again, okay, so that is correct. Okay, so if we save that, that's essentially just creating another accordion here. But now what we want to do is we want to nest these within this details tag. So right outside of this closing div, we'll do another emit command here. So we'll do a details. And here we want a summary tag. And for now, we'll just leave this summary tag. Well, actually, no, we'll go ahead and create some content here. So I am a user. And this is going to be a plus sign to create that div for our details content. And here's going to be a paragraph tag and just some randomly generated content. Now, I'm actually going to be creating two of these. And you could just write this twice, or what you could do is select this, this command, wrap it in parentheses. So let's go ahead and just wrap this in parentheses and then say times 2. So times 2, and then hit return. And now we have two details nested within this details. So let's go ahead and just change this one to I am a seller. Click save, come over here, refresh. And if we expand this, you'll see now we have two nested items here that we can expand to even see more content, and that these are nested within this one. So if we close it, the whole thing goes away. All right, so now we essentially have the accordion created. So let's go ahead and jump into our CSS and make this just look a little bit better. So we'll come over back to our project. into our style.css file. And the first thing I'm going to do is just some resets here. So I'm going to do padding 0, margin 0, and box sizing I'm going to set to border box. Now I've covered this in other videos, but essentially what we're doing here is we're taking the default values from the browser and just resetting them to 0. And that way we can add any type of spacing and sizing that we wish. So that way none of the defaults are overriding anything. And box sizing is going to allow us to add padding and margin in the way that we want. And I'll be sure to link a better description of that in the video below. So if you want to check that out and don't know what that is, feel free to check that out. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is on the HTML tag or our root element, I'm going to set a font size here to 16 pixels. Now by default, it should already be 16 pixels, but I like to explicitly go ahead and just name that here. Okay, so next thing is on the body tag, I'm going to add some padding here. Now I'm going to do the padding, instead of pixels, I'm going to be doing it relative to this initial font size here of 16 pixels. So the way we can do that is we can say 6 rem, and this is a relative unit. So essentially what we're saying here is we're going to do 6 times 16 pixels. And the reason I like to use padding, or it's not padding, but rem, is because it's relative. And let's say, for instance, someone wants to increase the font size here, or the relative font size. So if they increase this and we use rem across our entire application, our entire application is going to scale up for them. So this helps people who need more accessibility when using your website. Okay, so now we have that. The next thing we want to do is set the font family here. So this is going to be the default Roboto with a fallback of sans serif. So let's go ahead and save that and get an idea here of what has changed. So let's see here, the padding has been increased. The margin and padding, or the padding on the body has been increased. The padding and margin here is scrunched up because we haven't actually told it what it needs to be. But we can also see that the text looks different because we made it to be Roboto. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and style that title tag, which is that H1 tag. And on here, I'm just going to add a margin bottom of 2 rem and a font size. That's it, just to make this really quick. So if we come in here, we should see some spacing now, and it's the same size because it's still 2 rem by default. All right, so let's go ahead and style the HR tag. And here I'm just going to add a margin, top of bottom of 1 rem, or 16 pixels in this case, and a left of right margin of 0. So if we come in here, we should now see a little bit of spacing here between these two elements. Perfect. All right, so now we can move on to the details tag, so details. And here I'm just going to add some padding. So 0 on the top and bottom, and on the left and right, we're going to add a little bit of padding. So if we refresh this, you'll see that there's a little bit of padding here on this details. So let's come into inspect. So you'll see the padding here is just a little bit. Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead now and style this summary. So we'll do details, we'll do an arrow, which means anything that's directly nested, any children of this details. So any child that is a summary of details, we're going to add these styles to. And the first thing I'm going to do is list style none. And in Chrome, I think if we refresh this, it actually doesn't change anything. So the way we get rid of these ugly default arrows is with, and what we'll do here is we have to use like a WebKit extension in order to style this the way we want in Chrome. So we'll do this, and it's going to be WebKit details marker, I believe. And we'll do display none. So if we refresh that, you'll see that that arrow goes away. Perfect. All right, so let's come back to this detailed summary and go ahead and finish styling this right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is say display flex, and I'm going to justify the content to be space between. Now, if you've never used Flexbox, check out this really awesome resource from CSS Tricks. I refer to this all the time. So what we're doing here is we first have to define Flexbox by saying display flex. And what we're doing is then we're justifying the content based off of space between. So you can see what it does is it automatically figures out how much space to put things, and everything on the left and the right gets pushed all the way to the sides, and everything in the middle gets spaced out evenly. So in this case, if we come back to our original project or our finished project, it's going to take the summary, push it all the way over to the left, and then this arrow that we're going to be using is pushed all the way over to the right. So that's how, or that's why we're using space between here. So let's go ahead and give this a little bit of breathing room as well by adding a 1 rem padding all the way around. Then we'll set a font size here. So we'll do a little bit bigger. Let's do 1.25 rem. And we want this to show that it's clickable. So we use a cursor pointer. So if we come back here and come back to our this and refresh it, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit now. If we click here, you'll see that our cursor changes, and now we can you see the styling and padding has been added. So there's still some stuff here that we want to do. And the next thing we want to do is we want to style and add these arrows here. Now what I did is I went ahead and I created these images in an SVG using Figma, and then I exported and optimized all that. And I'm not going to be showing all of the details for that, but I am going to show what you need to do in order to get that file into the project. What we need to do is create a new file called, new folder called images. And I'm going to pull in that SVG image from my downloads. So I'm just going to come over here, click this arrow SVG, and then drop it into this image. And now we have this here in our local project. Okay, so now what we can do is we can go ahead and do details summary. So again, styling the details summary. And we're going to be using or adding a pseudo element. So pseudo element, just like its name suggests, is kind of an element that's not directly written in your HTML, but you can add it to elements in CSS. What we can do here is we can add content by using this content parameter. And you could just do like a text tag like hello, and that would show hello in your CSS or your HTML. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to show an image. So we can do that by writing URL and then where the image is. So that's images arrow.svg. And we need to go ahead and set a width and height for this so we can actually see it. So it's going to be 1.5 rem, a height of 1.5 rem, and we need to set a display here of inline flex, and go ahead and save that. And it looks like we need a semicolon here. If we refresh this, you'll see now we get this arrow on the far right of our accordion here. Now by default we want this, it's not going to change and rotate because we haven't actually set that yet in with animations. So in order to do that, what we can do is we can say details. And now what we want to do is we want to add a style based on if this details is open or not. And the way we can do that is with that open attribute. And we can target that using brackets and then the name of the attribute, just like this. Now what we can do, again, target the summary and the after pseudo element. We can say transform, rotate. We want to rotate it 90 degrees. Let's go ahead and just save that. Come back into our project and refresh it. And now you'll see that it rotates 90 degrees. Perfect. Now, in order to make this like a nice smooth transition, we can do one more thing here in this original after pseudo element, and that is to add a transition parameter where we target the transform of this element. So what we changed down here, it's going to be 0.3 seconds, and we're going to add an ease motion to this. So it's nice and eases in and eases out. So it looks nice and smooth. So now if we come back and check this out, you'll see that that arrow, instead of just jumping automatically, has this nice smooth transition. It just looks a lot cleaner without adding any extra JavaScript or anything like that. Okay, so now that we do that, we have our animation working. We have the ugly arrow away in Chrome. There's just a few more things here we need to style. And the first one is our details content class. And here we're just going to set a font size of 1 rem and just give it a little bit of breathing room. So 1 rem on the top and bottom and 1.5 rem on the left and right. And what this is going to do is going to kind of just tab it over a little bit and indent it. So it just looks a little cleaner to read. So if we save that, make sure I saved it, refresh it, you'll see that now this text has a little more breathing room from the top, and it's like kind of pushed over a little bit from the summary, right? So now it has some more breathing room. And this is carried over to these as well. And the last thing I want to do is just style those paragraph tags. So let's do details content. We're going to style each child paragraph tag, and it's going to have just a margin. So margin, we'll do top and bottom of 1 rem and left and right of 0. And that's just going to give us a little bit more breathing room here on these individual paragraph tags. So that's basically everything. We've created this accordion really in just a matter of a couple minutes using just the details and summary tags in HTML, and then using those built-in features. And then we brought in some CSS to show you how you can style it and make it look a little sharper for your project. Now, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider checking out our other design and development tutorials on our YouTube channel and on skillthrive.com. Again, I'm Hunter from Skillthrive, and I'll see you in the next lesson.